August, won't you walk with me? I'm the puppet dog. Welcome to the Animal Intuitive channel, where we talk about all things having to do with both animals and supporting pet parents. And that's why we have a special guest here on the show tonight. So, although a lot of times we're talking about things like animal communication, natural pet care, and experts in the fields of animal care and advocacy, tonight we have a very special guest, John Kelly, profiler. John Kelly has been on the show before, but we're having him back because we're coming at things at a little bit of a different angle today, and an important angle. John Kelly has been involved with over 100 profiling cases. He's been on shows like Investigation Discovery, Nancy Grace, many shows, and he is committed to, trying to solve these terrible cases of, terrible things that happen to people. But we want to talk today about prevention. Is there a way to prevent people from committing horrible acts? What do we do? Can we do something when people are young? Is there a way to change the world a little bit? So there are some things that have come out, some studies, some work that has been going on for the past several years that may be indicating that, yes, there are things that can be done. Surprise, surprise. A lot of people don't believe that, but we're going to talk about it here today. So, John, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. John Kelly, profiler here. Thanks for having me on. I'm, so grateful to Ann. She's a very gracious host. I've been on before. I truly appreciate her. I appreciate the work she does. And that's the major reason I'm here, is because she does so much great and kind work. I mean, it's just really unbelievable. Also, she gave me permission to plug my book, so I'm going to plug it. It's called Discovering Lazarus, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly of John Kelly, and how I kicked a horrible cocaine addiction, became a counselor, moved on to become a psychotherapist, and a profiler. And I have been on many shows, as Ann mentioned to you, for the last 20 years. It's been a long run, Ann. And certainly a lot of the work I do is the darker side of what you do. I mean, you're the angel taking care of the animals, and I'm out chasing the devil. So that's pretty much the way it is. I call it evil energy, and I see it blossoming all the time. So you tell me what you'd like me to talk about. Certainly, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, I was just, before we even came on, I was preparing for the show and just doing some research. Some people know this, some people don't. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. So even in my initial years in that work, I worked with people who were in the realm of offenders of different types, and kids as well, and kids who had done some serious things too. And there was kind of I guess a hopelessness, or there wasn't much hope as far as what to do. There's a lot of frustration, and I think that from what I'm seeing now, there are some ways that we can kind of get ahead of things, and that's what I want to talk about. But also I want to be realistic too, and hear from you about what you've experienced, because you have dealt one to one. You've spoken with, I know, at least one serial killer, and other murderers and things, different people. So we want to hear it from somebody who has been right in the weeds with this. And you're also part of something called STOCK, which is, remind me what that stands for.
Yeah, STALK stands for System to Apprehend Lethal Killers, and pretty much can find us anywhere on the internet, anywhere you want to search. We've been involved in many cases. Any cases that I've been involved in, Stock has been involved in. We have a great team. Frank Adamson's the vice president. He was the commander in chief of detectives in the Green River case. I worked with him up there in Washington on the Green River case over 20 years ago. That's how I met Frank. And when he retired, he joined us at Stock. And Frank is really a cop's cop, if you will. Um, there's nobody that knows more about serial murder than Frank Adamson. He's taught at Quantico a number of times. So we're very happy with the team we have. And of course, there are other doctors and therapists that are connected to the team. And great homicide detectives besides Frank. So we can kind of reach out whenever we need to whatever field and grab a really true professional in that field, like asking you to come on and talk about various situation that occurred over in England with the animals and everything, and how you and how the dog would have acted, and we see you as a professional asset,
Oh,
so we thank you, yeah.
that's an honor to hear. Thank you. That was yes, that was when I was on John's show too. So check that out after this, not right now. So when we look at the statistics, they are a little daunting. 100% of sexual homicide offenders examined had a history of cruelty towards animals. 70% of all animal abusers have committed at least one other criminal offense, and almost 40% have committed violent crimes against people. 63.3% of men who committed crimes of aggression admitted to cruelty to animals. It's just an ongoing connection between, I can go on and on with the statistics about people who harm animals and how that ends up looking in our society. It is seen that there's a connection absolutely between people who harm animals and people who offend in their own home. They're violent towards their family members and can be violent in the larger society. So even if you don't care at all about animals, you should care about this, because there is a link. So, how do we get ahead of this, and what is the reason for it? And we know that there are some differences in brain structure, perhaps genetic, like DNA, that they're looking at right now. From my understanding, is that's a very early on field as far as what can be done about that, because it's kind of daunting. But as far as brain structure, we know that there is a difference when we're talking. Let's just say we're talking about psychopaths, when we're talking about serial killers, and that's not a DSM diagnosis, but it is a term that I think we can use here. The DSM sort of umbrella diagnosis for that, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is what people like us therapists, John is also an LCSW, that's what we use if we were going to go in and try and come up with, well, what's going on here? What's the diagnosis? That's the book. Many people have heard of that. But in the DSM, they would put this not under psycho. It's not a psychopath diagnosis. It's antisocial personality disorder that people would more look to put the label, let's just say. But I don't know. Do you like to refer to these people that you're dealing with mostly as psychopaths, or do you like to refer to them as having antisocial personality disorder? I'm not sure where you come from with that, with your language.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of I guess 20 years ago it became the new term antisocial personality disorder. But, and just to keep everything straight, I am not a licensed clinical social worker. I am a social worker who's done a lot of clinical work before the board even formed.
Oh, yeah, right, right.
So now,
Yeah,
I mean, but I didn't decide to go for licensing
you
in
got the
it because
experience for sure.
I'm also an addiction specialist, and I'm licensed to
Yeah.
the Academy, First Academy for Addiction. So, I mean, my focus has been really for the last 20 some years on the making of the monster. Okay. What goes into the monster? And one of the ingredients is animal abuse, early animal abuse. Okay. And I love animals. I love animals. Okay. And I've had many animals. And primarily cats, but I've had some dogs too. And the bottom line is, I just couldn't wrap my head around why somebody would treat an animal in such a harsh way. And I really deep dived into it. And the bottom line is, it's usually unresolved anger in one respect, that's going on, usually with a child in the house. For one reason or another, they're carrying around a lot of anger, or it is someone in the house that is using alcohol or other substance, and they're carrying around a lot of anger. Genetically, this is a whole new world that we're looking into. Um, so we're looking at what creates the psychopath. I'm going to call him a psychopath. Okay.
Let's go with
What
that.
creates the psychopath? We know lots of times there is abuse. In fact, just about all the time there is abuse. But along with that abuse, I have, and it's really taken me a while to kind of hitch up to this. There is this genetic predisposition of some sort, or this misfiring or miswiring of circuits in the brain. And these people that I've interviewed, um, who are psychopaths, because I've interviewed, thousands of people, but for in being a criminal profiler and profiling criminals, the psychopaths are not able to really feel any remorse or guilt. I mean, they are just not able. This is, something I really had to catch up with, because it was really hard for me to accept the fact that they could hurt an animal or hurt a human being and not feel anything from it. And it's
Yes.
just factual. That's the way they are. One man told me, another one agreed, after I confronted him with what I got from the first guy, that, learn how to hurt and kill small animals, and that will, desensitize you to working your way up to kill bigger animals like human beings. Okay. So, I mean, the psychopaths I've talked to, I mean, they just, I mean, go out of their way to kill an animal just, for fun, for some kind of self gratification. Um, and it wouldn't even bother them one bit. They wouldn't even flinch. On the other side of that, they're not the majority of abusers. The majority of abusers, I'm sure, are people that are extremely angry, usually younger people who really have parent issues with their parents, or they're angry over something. They've been involved in some kind of abuse or dysfunctional household, that they've grown up in, and that's had an effect on them. And they're just angry, and they just misdirect their anger and take it out on poor animals. Okay. Or, you have older adults too that are drunk or on drugs, and are just walking around very angry at themselves and what they've become, and they misdirect that anger, and they, will take it out on a smaller pet, a smaller animal. And when I talk about younger people and I talk about child abuse, I'm also I want the audience to understand I'm including neglect, because neglect is abuse. Okay. And some of these younger people feel neglected, and they're very hurt over it. and hurt kids hurt other people and things. Okay, I mean that's just the way it goes. So there's a lot more study that needs to be done, but it is probably the most upsetting thing to me, uh, and grabs at my heart, very, very close to identifying the human female victims. So it's not only dogs or cats or other animals, but human victims that psychopaths have tortured and killed and hurt. I mean, losing an animal can affect a family just, very similar to losing a family member. In fact, they are considered family members,
Absolutely.
like a child. But I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. So go ahead.
No, no, absolutely, because everything you're saying is just it's fascinating the work that you've done, and you have been up close with it. And just to kind of like piggyback on what you're talking about, they have found that there okay, so when we talk about the DSM and certain diagnoses, and first of all, I do just want to kind of say that I'm not like a big DSM. It's what we use if in the world of psychology. It's the language that is used to speak to each other, but many of us have issue with the DSM, labels that we're giving people left and right. And a lot of times I think things are just, to me, they're just on a spectrum, and we're trying to come up with these explanations for things. However, just to speak in this language of psychopaths. People aren't going to so much like to hear this, but they have found that under the conduct disorder diagnosis, there is a certain subset there of children who have limited prosocial emotions, they call it, and they have a lack of remorse or guilt. They can have a lack of remorse of guilt, callous, lack of empathy, unconcerned about performance. So like in school or whatever they're doing, a shallow or deficient affect, and they might have other personality traits like thrill seeking, fearlessness, insensitivity to punishment, and this may distinguish those individuals as being ones who are more at risk of going on to commit some more serious offenses, especially if there's a early onset of it. So prior to 10 years old, they have found that corresponds to be a predictor of future psychopathology, or what they would call antisocial personality disorder in the DSM. So what do we do about that? And so on the one hand, it's like, oh gosh, we're labeling these kids with this horrible, label. But the good thing about it is it's giving an opportunity to say, well, what can we do? And it does seem as though they are finding that young children with these kinds of conduct problems and these elevated callous unemotional traits, they call them. So they've got conduct issues, they've got this callous unemotional trait. They are finding that these children actually have a tendency to respond better to more of a reward-based parenting style, or more warmth they respond to. So it's kind of like a little bit, you're kind of intuitive. You're like, wait, what? But yeah, they actually do. They don't respond as well to sort of punishment-based parenting, or whatever, treatment, school, etc. So this research is suggesting that there's certain types of treatments that are better for these types of kids. And there's one called parent-child interaction therapy, for callous unemotional adaptation. So there's this adaptation to it. And they're finding that this is actually compelling, that this could be very helpful. They're using it in certain programs. I'm forgetting the name of one of them, but they're actually finding that it's helping. It's like a place where, I think it's in Wisconsin, where I can't think of the name of it, where particularly boys, I think, are in this program that have not done well in other sort of correctional situations. They've gotten into trouble. They send them there, and they're actually doing better, and they're measuring these things statistically. So to me, that does show that there is some hope, and we do know that the brain structure can be different. There's a difference in the amygdala not being as activated. It's not the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex that helps a person have things like guilt. It's not there to the same degree in these individuals. So we have to sort of take a step back and say, okay, there really might be something going on that they can't necessarily, they didn't cause. And then also, if you throw in, like you said, a difficult home life situation, it's just kind of like adding fuel to the fire and increasing the risk. So sometimes having this different type of brain can be helpful in
Mhm.
certain types of jobs, and but it depends on how the person has been raised and their awareness of it, and not all of them go out to commit serious offenses. So I think it's good to have these conversations because it can be, it can help us to think about, well, what can we do to shift things going forward and to help prevent serious harm coming to both people and animals. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, John? What's
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. I mean, a parent-child connection, the reward, um, you know, program or, oh, I
Yep,
lost you there.
my
But
little
anyway,
camera went out. It's okay. You keep talking.
yeah, the reward can be really, really great there because the child may, like I said, feel neglected in some way by the parent. But then, if the parent is working with the child to try and firm the child up with some kind of reward dynamic that would help the child be kinder to the animals or kinder, to even siblings. I mean, because a lot of these kids attack their siblings too. So, I could see it work in a lot of different ways. The other part of it that I think um, is interesting is the consequence theory. I mean, you can always set up consequences. I'd like to see, you know, between the stick and carrot approach. I'd rather see the approach with the carrot first, a kinder, gentler approach that would, maybe solidify the parenting and help the child to feel better about themselves. If they think they are achieving something and getting rewarded for it, I've seen that change behavior many times.
Hmm.
And but as sometimes if that's not working, then you have to move towards the consequence and see if the consequence takes preference. If and sometimes it might take a while to go back and forth in between. So the child starts to have an understanding, or even an adolescent has an understanding that look at, if you act a certain way, there's a reward to it, because you're conforming to society and you're being kind to animals. If you are not being kind to animals and you're abusing, you're not conforming to society, and there's going to be consequences eventually. I like that idea of starting off with the reward. I mean, pretty much that's what we did at our counseling centers, and it worked extremely well because we were working with a lot of drug abusing and drug addicted people. And we found that, they started responding when they were starting to get more positive feedback for things that they really accomplished, versus just getting penalized and put down for things that they were doing and their life in the drug culture. So we found that the kinder approach can be the better approach, but it has to be balanced. They have to understand what's working and what's not working, and again and again and again, we come back to the parents. So as far as I'm concerned, the major anti-animal abuse weapon of choice is parenting. Parenting is anti-animal abuse. I mean, there's no question about it. Parents have to, really be involved in
Mm,
some way, shape, or form. Just with some of these kids, it just doesn't happen naturally. With some, it does. I hope, and it looks like with the majority, it does. You know, they're kinder people. They've seen their parents be kinder people, so they've become kinder towards animals, and they may just not take it out on animals. And
right.
not. Generate their anger or misdirect their anger in another direction to some poor, unfortunate animal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm putting this picture up for to take my place because my camera's not working. So excuse the shameless plug, although
Yeah, no
that
problem.
is a free class if anybody does want to take it. It is on my my website, Intuitive Touch Animal Care. You can find that it's a free 90-minute animal communication class. But that's the only picture I could pull in. I apologize, I didn't have a regular one. So anyway, uh,
Great picture, great
um,
picture. Nothing to apologize about that picture.
it's got my guys on there, my puppies. So
Mhm.
people like that. But yeah, I mean, it seems as though, the all of the programs that strive to help children who have shown these signs of conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, which is like a kind of a lower level diagnosis than conduct disorder. It doesn't rise to that level, but there's still issues with behavior and acting out. They find that it's got to be parent involvement. I was noticing that some of the programs that they were recommending that have been around for a very long time actually have really been holding strong. They're programs that even when I was working in community mental health, they were using, but they do seem to have some more recent ones that are a little bit more targeted. But it seems like that if depending on if the person really has this level of dysfunction, if you want to call it that, or this sort of different type of brain and whatever else is going on that they're trying to understand better with their chemistry, that they just respond better to the more positive kind of reward system. Obviously, like you said, you can't just let people do whatever and only intervene positively. But there do have to be consequences. But I think it's really great that they're starting to narrow down what to do about certain types of brains.
Mhm.
In general, it's a big advancement and can really help to make change. And it does seem as though there is a huge, like you mentioned about people situations in homes. Statistically, 75% of women who have companion animals report that their pet has been the target of violence or threat of violence by the partner. So they use these animals to frighten the women, and also 90% of the time that means kids who are, if there's children in the home, they have witnessed it, and then kids do repeat what they see. They become sometimes desensitized to it. So like you're saying, it isn't always just about brain types, and it's just sometimes the home life situation. So we have to address that
Exactly.
too. Yeah. I'm wondering too, have you personally had the people that you've worked with directly, the offenders, talk about what they feel or believe, if you can believe them? I don't know what you would say about that, but about what the best tactic is, or the best action to prevent people from going out and committing crimes against others.
I specifically talked to one serial killer about what could have been different in the way he ended up um, killing animals or torturing animals, or um, how he ended up on that path. And he knows, I mean, he'd be the first one to tell you that he can't feel any remorse or any guilt. But he said it's really, really important, if you want to get to kids, get to them early, and try to get them to have respect for nature. Now he even brought it down to the point of torturing insects.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he as a kid, like you were just talking about, how they are when they're younger, right? And and how they're acting out as children. Well, he brought up how important it is to keep them from killing even insects, because they'll get into torturing insects, and then the next thing you know, they're looking
Mm-hmm.
for something bigger than an insect, which could be an animal, dog, cat, whatever. And then later on, it could be brother, sister, sibling, and then they move up the line, to taking it out on people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women have been, you know, um, victimized, traumatized by watching someone try to intimidate them through attacking, their pet, an animal that they love.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he, by any chance, mention that he had been exposed to anything like that as a child, that he witnessed it? Or.
He talked about them not having a lot of regard. His father was a hunter, so he didn't have much regard for an animal. This guy became an extremely major hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Went to Vietnam when he was 18. 18, he joined to go to Vietnam. Told me he wanted to kill people. He did.
Hmm.
And, came home with a couple Purple Hearts, re-upped for a third year before he came home. Saw a lot of combat, was a killer.
Mm-hmm.
But really, he saw his father act out in very, very punitive ways.
Okay.
Um, not to animals, but I got the feeling his father really didn't care that much about animals. Like I said, he was a major hunter. He taught this guy how to hunt. This guy would shoot anything, anywhere, any animal, anywhere, anytime. He didn't care,
Mm-hmm.
but also, he was abused, severely abused as a child, beaten. And what I find with a lot of these guys, if nobody cares about their feelings, at some point they become immune to other people's feelings. Now, these are the people that don't have the genetic predisposition.
Okay.
So you
Mm-hmm.
got kind of two
Yep.
things going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are people who have a genetic predisposition, and there's some research on this. In fact, one of the fellows that's leading the research, um, has been tested as a psychopath, but he's not a killer.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
mean, the
I know
vast
who
majority
yeah, I
of
know who you're
psycho,
talking about. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, are not killers. And um, you know, I truly believe if they're raised in a kind, loving family, there's a much better chance they're going to be a kinder, maybe even loving person. Uh, so again, it's to me, it's parents, parents, parents,
Yeah.
and family. I think that's where it all really begins one way or the other. Even if you get into genetics, I mean, it's still family. It's the sperm and the egg, right? I mean, that whole genetic piece, which I had a hard time with. I really had a hard time because I saw the abuse, the consistent abuse with every one of these guys. And it
Okay.
was hard to just say, "Oh, come on, man, this is genetic too. This guy has no feelings for anything."
Right.
But I had to accept there are people I have talked to, like the one guy said to me the other day. I happened to be talking to one of them, called me up. He's in prison. He's in prison doing 2 life sentences. He said, "I know what to do about my son. He's mad. He's drinking too much, blah, 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 blah. And he sent me on a guilt trip. He's trying to send me on a guilt trip." They said, "Well, you don't have to worry about being sent on a guilt trip because you don't feel any guilt." And he started laughing. And he said, "Yeah, that's right." But I mean, it's just some people are just made this way.
Yeah.
And they know it. They know it.
Right.
And they know they're different.
Mhm.
And one guy said to me, like, "We're aliens amongst you.
Mhm.
We know it. We walk among you."
Right. I think I just in when I was doing some of this research, I think that was something that was said by oh, what was his name? The guy out in California that was really kind of had a satanic spin to him. I forget his name. The dark hair, very dark hair. He was the one who like they had to chase him through the streets, and the people caught him like in
Yeah, the Night
the
Stalker.
Night Stalker. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name, but he made a statement like,
Ramirez.
yeah, he was basically like, you can't understand me. I mean, of course, some of this is narcissism, but he's saying though, you just can't understand me. I'm just made different. And so yeah, there
Right.
comes down to some responsibility there too. Well, okay, well if you know that, so does that mean that you get to still act on it, act on these impulses? Um, just because they are different. So that I mean, that's question, and I'm wondering if you what you think about that, the impulses that they have that are there and they don't have the guilt, and does it? It's a really difficult moral question that I'm sure angers a lot of people to even have to like think about it. But do they have entire responsibility? Is there something going on there where it's almost like a complete predator with no self control, except for the fact that they're not doing it in front of the police? So there's got to be some level of self control. I mean, they're not going out and murdering someone right on the street in front of a police officer, in other words. So there's got to be some
Yeah,
ability created.
the uh, the impulse uh, problem is a major problem. They get uh, the craving, the urge, and this is all based on self gratification. I was the first one to come out with that serial murder was an addiction. Okay. I mean, if you can't stop doing heroin, you're a heroin addict. You can't stop doing cocaine, you're a cocaine addict. Well, if you can't stop killing people, guess what? You're
Mm-hmm.
addicted to killing people. You're an addict of killing people. And when you really dig down, and that's what brought me into this whole field, the addictions field, because why do people use? People use to get high. What does that mean, you get high? Well, it makes me feel good. What do you mean feel good? Why don't you feel good already? You get into the whole thing and everything. And, you know, well, I when I do my drug or whatever, I come alive. I feel alive. And I've heard that so many times. I've had counseling centers for, been the executive director of extra care health services for like 26, 27 years. So, looking at this, what does that mean? You feel alive. So now I go to serial killers, and you're actually addicted to killing, and killing makes you feel alive. And I've confronted a couple of them with this, and it's an addiction, definitely, John. It's an addiction, definitely. It's the highest of all highs. You're godlike. It's a godlike high because you have the last word over whether somebody lives or they don't. But getting back to the impulse and impulse control, they cannot handle, from what they tell me, the sexual excitement of being on the hunt and stalking, especially a female, and the sexual excitement that brings because they want to control and dominate, that woman. Okay, sexually dominate that woman. And it's horrible to hear, but this is what floats their boat. And they have a very, very hard time of controlling it. Now, if you take an addict away from the cocaine, there's probably a good chance he can recover as long as he's not around cocaine. If you take a heroin addict away from heroin, and as long as he's not around the people, the places, or the things, the heroin, I mean, there's a good chance he's going to recover, as long as he stays away from it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Learning how to deal with these feelings in another way. But with the serial killer, and I've seen this over and over, and I mean, we just had one or two last year that I know that went away for 15, 20 years in prison, did their time and got released. Well, they were no sooner released and back out on the street when they're back around their drug of choice, which happens to be a woman.
It's crazy.
They're addicted to having this sexual dominance over women. Well, how do you control that? You can't. I mean, at
Hmm.
some point, if they're back in population, the relapse recidivism rate among sexual violent offenders is off the
Hmm.
charts. And with serial killers, I mean, I just do not believe they should be ever be allowed out on the streets again because they are around. The very fact they're in society, they are around people who are their drug of choice, if you will, and where this sets off that urge, and they have very, very little impulse control at all. And along with the very little impulse control, I think something you mentioned earlier, the stimulation of the risk taking, the stimulation of the forbidden and the risk taking all comes together. And it started off with animal cruelty and animal torture.
Right. That's where it started. Yep. So that's where that really needs to be taken seriously. Um, there are more and more laws that are taking it seriously and showing that it's being taken seriously. I mean, it is considered um, in all 50 states, the United States, the federal government now considers some form of animal cruelty a felony, some forms of it, um, which is good. But I don't think there's enough. In fact, I'm going to be having someone on my show. Probably this won't, I'm not sure this show will be out before that person comes on, but just to talk about maximum punishment for some of these offenses towards animals because it's just not sometimes handled the right way, I don't think, in our criminal justice system. It's not taken seriously enough. So there is an
It's
interesting, yeah, and I mean, for not for people who would be labeled serial killers, but I did have somebody on the show, an attorney who talked about a program called BARC, BARC, that she was involved in and developed for. It's an education program for people who have committed certain acts, more neglect, more not taking care of animals, that kind of thing. It's a program they can do if they've been they're in the criminal justice system already. They can take this program, or they can be ordered to take this program to get some education around it. And it does seem to have effect, statistically speaking, so that's good. But it's not necessarily for really hardcore animal abusers, because that's not really the core issue. It's
E-
not education.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, anything at all helps, and just moving in the right direction, even at a
Right.
slower pace, it's still the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that really I've watched too is this connection of arson that seems
Mm-hmm.
to go along with animal abuse too. Okay, um, a lot of these guys may not become serial killers, but they may become arsonists and rapists. I mean, and they've had a history of animal abuse. So
Right.
any
Well,
any
power.
any right, exactly. They grew up powerless, so now they want power over
Yeah.
because they didn't have any when they were children.
Right.
In a lot of respects, not all of them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like some of them have that genetic flaw, but being powerless as a child can lead to you wanting a lot of power as an adult, power over others, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's I guess more to be revealed,
Yeah.
but at least I'm seeing and you're seeing, and you're seeing it more than me, and I love hearing it from you. Steps in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's kind of I really didn't plan this out, but the picture I have up there about the animal communication class, I mean, to me, that's part of it, is really teaching people in society that animals have feelings, they're
Oh,
sentient beings. Getting that in there from an early age. Uh, there is also a program called Heart. If there's any educators out there, it's HEART, Heart. I had them on the show as well. You can always go to my playlists. These are interviews in the interview section, everything I've mentioned so far. But they have programs for educators around this kind of thing, teaching children about having empathy for animals and just better relationships with animals. So anything we can do to teach that from a young age, and hey, take this class with take it with your kids, show their that I have that's free. But so I think that's a very important part of it, is to open up that understanding, that dialogue about animals do have feelings, they have thoughts, and we need to respect them. And I actually do have not out yet, but I have a children's book that's coming out in the new
yeah,
year.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see that. I am. I'm
Thank
really.
you. I'm so
Yeah,
excited to see it too.
yeah,
And
yeah.
uh,
I'll have you on my show too when you get that because that's very
thank
important.
you. Yeah, that book came. Part of the reason for that book was for this purpose, is to really highlight that, and to really go into a story, that helps kids understand that connection that they can have with animals, and that animals really have thoughts and have feelings. And so it's been fun writing that. That's one of my favorite things, but that's coming. So
Next.
is there anything else that you think we haven't touched on, that anything else that I
No,
missed?
not for today. I mean, maybe we'll think of something in over the days, the weeks, over the holidays. Who knows?
Yep.
But I think we've covered it all today, and
Yep.
I can't thank you enough for having me on. Happy holidays to you and your audience,
Thank
and
you.
many blessings. Truly
Yes.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we'd love to hear from you. Those who are watching this, let us know your thoughts. And again, as John said, many blessings, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. And thank you so much for coming on, John. I
Oh
really, really
yeah,
appreciate it.
anytime, anytime. Anytime. We got to help the little guys. We got to help the little animals. They're the little guys. We got to take care
Yes,
of.
absolutely. Thank you, and God bless.
God bless.